Right, welcome everybody to today's meeting of City of York Council's Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Hollier and I'm the chair of the committee. I'm joined on screen by the other members of the committee who sort of denoted by the letters CLLR before their names, and by Gareth Arnold, who's the council's development manager. We may also be joined by various legal, planning and technical staff as we go, depending on what issues arise. But if I could just ask officers to please state your name and position when you're first called to speak. As usual, for each item on the plans list, we'll start by receiving an update from planning officers. That'll be followed by questions from the committee. And then after this, we'll hear from our public speakers with another opportunity for further questions. And then lastly, we'll enter a debate phase during which a proposal will eventually be made and the committee will vote and come to a conclusion. If I could ask members, as usual, if you've got a question, please raise your virtual blue hand. If you've got a more time-sensitive supplementary question, then please do raise your hand to the screen and I'll bring you in sooner. So I think with that, we can move on to the agenda proper. So if I could just ask if members have any declarations they'd like to make at this point. Can't see any, so if we move on then to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 10th of December. If anybody's got any issues they'd like to raise, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just the second paragraph at minute 34. I don't think is an accurate reflection of what I declared and why I withdrew from the item in question. I've watched back to the video footage and just double checked. I wasn't withdrawing because I was predetermined. I was withdrawing because I had subsequently found that where I live was within the same res park zone as the applicant, and did want to make that clear, having called in the item, that I'd found that out subsequently. So if it's okay, I've drafted an alternative wording, which I'm happy to either read out now or just forward on to you, that I think just better reflects that.
Yeah, if you could just quickly read that out and then the committee can agree and we can.
Sure. So I'd like to propose changing that paragraph to read, Councillor Crawshaw declared a personal prejudicial interest in agenda item 4B due to living within the same res park zone as the application property. Having also called the decision in for consideration at this subcommittee, Councillor Crawshaw wished to make clear that he had only realised this interest after the call-in request was made and that it had no bearing on his decision to request a call-in. He left the meeting prior to consideration of that item and took no part in the debate or decision thereon.
Okay, sounds okay to me, but if anybody's got any, no, can't see any dispute, so we could make that amendment to the minutes, otherwise I'll sign them.
Thank you.
When we're allowed to. And
I can email that wording to the democracy officer if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Thank you. To move on then to item 3, public participation. We've got no public speakers under the general remit of the committee, so I think we're able to move straight on to the plans list. Gareth, at this point, could you just speak to us about item 4B, please?
Yes. In respect of item 4B, there's an issue that's arisen in respect to the highway design of the scheme and the aspirations of the applicant in terms of it being a low car development, and that requires further consideration by the applicant. So we did think that there was a possibility that that might be sorted out before this meeting and the consideration of that application could go ahead, but that's not turned out to be the case. So we're seeking a deferral of that one, please.
Okay, thank you. If we could take then a quick vote on that, and our democracy officers there and able to conduct it. I guess it does need to be a named vote just for consistency. I think Fiona.
Yes, just hello. Right, take a named vote on this item then. So when I read your name out, can you say if you're in favour or not of the proposal?
Sorry, just a point of order. Because the officers proposed the deferral, does it need a member of the committee to propose a deferral?
if you want to do it by the book.
Yeah, let's do it. Are you happy to?
I'm very happy to propose deferral.
Okay, I'm happy to second that. So.
Right. So as before, when I read out your name, please indicate. So Councillor Crawshaw.
4.
Councillor Colwick.
4.
Councillor Fisher.
4.
Councillor Galvin.
4.
Councillor Dagorn.
4.
Councillor Melly.
4.
Councillor Orrell.
4.
Councillor Wardby.
4.
Councillor Webb.
4.
And Councillor Perrott.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
And 9-4 as well. So tap me on at the end. Thank you. So that has been deferred then. So if we could then move on to item 4A. Gareth, if you're able to give us a presentation and update.
I'll just share my screen. So, sorry, webcasting, can you make me a co-host, please? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is an application at 98B Tadcaster Road in Dringhouses, and it's the application for the erection of one dwelling and associated carport garden store following the partial demolition of a single-storey element to the front of number 98B Tadcaster Road. The site layout plan, members will have seen from the Ordnance Survey plan attached at page 25 of your agenda, these really long rear gardens from about number 96, so 92 down to 104, 108 Tadcaster Road, which have been, some of them have been subdivided over the years and provide up to three additional houses in the rear garden. And this is a proposal which continues that that pattern to the rear of 98B. So here's a house on the original, the host dwelling on the frontage, and the long red line taking you past 98A, 98B to the proposed house at the rear here. The existing access is maintained, and a pull-in area to allow vehicles to pass. It's quite a long access way, and you wouldn't necessarily want vehicles to have to stop and wait when they're exiting Tadcaster Road. It's the elevation. So at the top there's a rear elevation. Elevation 3 is the side elevation that's facing north. Elevation 2 here is the front elevation. This is number 100B, which is the adjacent bungalow, and you see the reference to the ridge heights here. And this is the elevation 1 is the courtyard elevation, so that would face towards 100B. The property is 2-storey by excavating for a lower floor area, and that section illustrates that. And the sections on this slide and the next slide also show the areas of excavation to create light wells. So this is section CC is from the north. This is the courtyard elevation, section BB, from the south. It's the front elevation, and that shows 100, 100B just there. And then that's a further front elevation, just a different section line through that that front projection. The lower floor plan with the outline of 100B below. The upper floor plan. This drawing shows the proposed carport. Carport floor plan. Of note, and members would pick up from the agenda papers that there is an outline planning permission on the site. So the site here, slightly different configuration and location of the garage and where the dwelling sits on the site and what's proposed. And that was a single story scheme. Photograph into the site, that's number 100B. It's broadly the application site beyond the greenhouse. Another photograph of 100B adjacent, and that's the access. This is number 98 at the Tadcaster Road frontage. So this is looking down that long access road. I think that's it. I do have an update that was circulated to members earlier today. It's just a short one. So there's a reference to do two additional conditions, two amendments relating to conditions, I should say. Condition number 2, we've inserted 2 new drawings, which were those section drawings that were shown a couple of minutes ago. And there's a proposed new condition 20, which seeks to establish ground level and restricts any alterations to ground levels other than what's approved under the plan, under the approved plans. And that's to ensure that the approved development does not have an adverse impact on surface water drainage and the character and appearance of the area. Now, before I stop sharing my screen, are there any particular slides that members would wish to see again, or any questions that relate to the drawings?
If members could raise their sort of virtual hand. Councillor de Gaulle, let's go first.
Yes, mentioned about the passing places that are provided. Is there any, I can't see any conditions that those have to be maintained once they've been established as a passing place. Is there any way which we can, was it? I missed it. Now that's saying that it has to be provided. Right, so it says it should be retained free of all obstructions. So that would that sort of apply? I'm not sure whether this is the road is within the control of the applicant. How do you actually maintain something if it's just something they pass and repass over rather than being part of the site?
Well, it's in the red line, so it's entirely lawful to impose conditions on land that they are putting forward in the planning application documents as being land that they have control over. And the planning permission runs with the land, so right. That condition would be enforceable on future landowners as well, as long as it served a planning purpose, which I think it very definitely does in this case.
Right. So obviously any property owner who has access through there would be informed that that's a condition of the planning consent, presumably.
It will come up on the planning permission would come up on any land registry, not any land registry search, any local authority search in terms of purchasing the land. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions at this point, Gareth. So
Okay.
if you want to take down the presentation. Do members have any other questions that didn't need the presentation? A few. Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. I asked yesterday about approximately how many trees will be cut down to make way for the development. You said you might be able to find out, Gareth.
Well, there is a tree survey, and I'll ask my colleague Tim Goodall, who's the planning case officer for the application, if he can come in and help us out on that one.
Can you see me? Hello, I'm Tim Goodall. I'm the planning case officer. In terms of that, we've got so the proposal, they provided an arboricultural constraints report, and in terms of they set out all the various different trees, and in terms of category A and category B trees and category C trees. So in terms of how important they are in terms of retention, there's a number of groups of trees, and I think there's one category B tree that's at risk, which is a silver birch on the northern corner, should be near the outbuilding. I think some of the smaller trees are due to go as well. All the category A trees are to be retained. I think there's a couple of sort of small sort of group C trees. Some of the groups will be lost, which will be literally where the house will be. I think there's sort of groups. I don't have a precise number. So it's groups G3 and G4. So the groups, I don't have exact numbers, but it's yeah, it's not very many.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the height of this building, because the original outline planning permission had a condition requiring that the dwelling be no more than 1 story in height, which usually would be between 4 and 4.5 meters, usually around 4.2. Whereas this one, it says that the ridge height will be 6.3 meters above the ground level, which is 50% higher. And I know the rest of the report says that that height is acceptable and it won't be overdevelopment or overbearing. But presumably when the original outline planning application was looked at, this would have been deemed too high, and that's why there was a condition saying that it couldn't be this high. So I was just wondering if you could provide some more background to that change, please.
The outline planning permission would have been looking at what was proposed at that time, and that was, as far as I'm aware, that was literally a layout plan similar to the site plan that's within the papers. So we, I think, because of the prevailing nature of the houses in that backline setting, although members who came to the virtual site visit yesterday would have seen that 98B was actually a 2-story dwelling, but we've looked to keep houses in those backland areas lower, to make them to help with them respect that setting a little bit, that backland setting a little bit more. So that was why that single-story condition was imposed on that. The applicants have come back with a full application, and they're proposing a 2-story dwelling, but that is achieved by excavation. So the ridge height is similar to the ridge height of the single-story dwelling next door, and I think that's an appropriate approach for them to take.
Thank you. Councillor Melly, did you have a supplementary there? So your hands.
No, Chair, my hand's gone up for another question, so I'll let other people speak first. Thanks.
Right. Go to Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. My substantive question was going to be of a similar nature, but I just wanted to understand the relationship between the condition of the outline application and then this new application that's come forward, because there's no application to amend the condition on the outline, and I just wanted to understand what the relationship was between the condition that was set, presumably with good reason, on the outline, and then this subsequent planning permission that comes in, and whether or not the condition for the outline is just waived, or could it still apply, or should there have been an application to amend that condition on the outline in order to enable a higher building than was conditioned against?
I'm not sure you can say that I'm not sure you can say this is a higher building, because it's the same height as the building next door. So what the condition said was it should be single story, and this is a two-story building, which maintains the ridge height of the adjacent single story building. But in terms of the substantive question, the outline planning permission is effectively a separate planning permission that remains extant. This is a full application. It's not a reserve matters application. They could have put in an application to vary that condition and then applied for this under a reserve matters, but they've gone down the line of applying for a full permission. So there's no the conditions of the outline aren't enforceable against this particular scheme. It's looked at afresh, although it's obviously it's a material consideration that it's in place and remains extant.
Councillor Crawshaw?
Thank you. That's really helpful, Gareth, and I think that explains that part. The other part then is just about whether the condition for a single-storey dwelling, is there any understood guidance or guidelines about what height a single-storey dwelling should be? Because if you're conditioning for a single-storey dwelling, you could presumably build something that was 13 or 14 meters high with no intervening floors and call it a single-storey building, but obviously that would be completely against the spirit of a condition. I guess here the challenge is, as Councillor Melly said, if we sort of routinely understand a single story to be sort of 4.5 meters, and then something comes in at 50% higher than that, is there an understanding in planning law about what the definition of a single story building would mean?
No, not in terms of its height. There's no definition there. A single story building would just be accommodation predominantly over one floor. I don't want to reinvent the outline application or the outline planning permission, but I guess if you were an alternative way of doing it, if you were concerned about the dwelling on the site not breaching the ridgeline of the neighbouring bungalow, would be perhaps to put a limit on the ridge height or something like that. That would be an alternative, but in this case, we chose the wording single story.
Thank you. Councillor de Gorn?
I wanted to return to the trees issue. Looking at paragraph 3.3, it says that the loss of trees would include laurel, early mature sycamore, goat willow, and a line of leyland cypress. And then it also makes reference to the silver birch category B. This is from the designer conservation team, which says efforts should be made to retain the birch, which I gather is not the case. Then if you look at the conclusion on page 17, that says that the loss of a grade B tree weighs against the proposal. However, it's limited to by location and the condition ensuring replacement tree planting. So that's the conclusion in terms of recommendation for approve is replacement tree planting. But then if you look at page 19, condition 5, which talks about a submission of an approved plan for replacement planting, it gives in the reason that suitable disposition of species across the sites in order to partly replace the loss of trees, which contribute to the general tree cover across the city. So from that, the conclusion I reach is that at the moment, the only condition is to give a sort of a token replacement tree planting rather than anything that has any significant contribution to the impact that the current trees have in the area. So the question that arises from that is, if given the constraints of the site, can we condition that in addition to whatever trees can be accommodated within the site, there's a contribution for tree planting elsewhere within the city boundary, because that reason there talks about contributing to the general tree cover across the city. So can we actually require a financial contribution towards tree planting across the city in addition to whatever can be accommodated suitably within the site?
I would say we don't have a policy which allows us to do that. Our policy GI4, which is the trees and hedgerows policy in the emerging local plan, talks about development being supported where it recognises the value of existing tree cover, provides protection for overall tree cover as well as for existing trees worthy of retention in the immediate or longer term, and retaining trees that make a positive contribution to the setting of the proposed development. What it doesn't, I think, in terms of securing off-site contributions on a plot such as this, I'd say that I think that was
sorry, Gareth. I just pause you there. We seem to be having problems with Councillor Perrott and Councillor Webb. Both, at least on my computer, have gone blank. Is that what other people are saying?
Councillor Perrott has just messaged to say they've dropped out.
If we could just
so they can't hear.
Can anyone hear me?
We can, but very sort of not very well. Yeah, we can't see. I can.
Chair. It's Richard Jackson here, technical support. Yes, it appears that there are some connectivity issues. What we could try and do is carry on as is. I think, has Councillor Perrott disappeared again?
Yes.
Yeah, it might be worth taking adjournment, removing Councillor Perrott from, in a current joining state from the meeting, and asking her to join again and see if that resolves it.
Okay. And just ask Councillor Webb.
Move an adjournment to allow the matter to be resolved, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
Yeah, that's all I can suggest. It might be that the connectivity won't allow them to do that, but we can do that in an adjournment, and if we can't get them in through the normal means, we can dial them in.
Okay. Well, let's take an adjournment at this point then. So if members could stop their videos and...
Yeah, just be aware that the public speakers will also be in the same breakout room as things currently stand. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. So yes, we've had a few sort of technical issues, and Councillor Perrett's turned off her video, but is still able to listen in, and I'll be able to check whether or not she's got any questions as we go. So she is still with us, just not visible on the screen. I think prior to the brief adjournment there, Gareth, you were telling us about trees, and it's probably at this point worth just going back a bit to the beginning of your answer, just for the benefit of Councillor Perrett, who I think dropped out halfway through your answer. I can see you've got a supplementary.
Sorry, muted. The question was about whether it was possible to require Section 106 contributions for off-site replacement of trees that were lost. And I was drawing members' attention to our policy position, which talks about largely talks about protection, including overall tree cover of trees which are worthy of retention in the immediate and longer term, and then also retaining trees that make a positive contribution to the setting of the proposed development. And I think that without a policy which specifically talks about, especially on a single plot site like this, without a policy which specifically talks about securing that type of benefit, it would be, in my view, very difficult to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I've looked at this site on Google Maps, and does appear to be a fairly substantial amount of tree cover on it at the moment. But given that the trees are not protected, is there anything that would prevent the applicant simply carrying out tree Armageddon, removing all the trees from the site and coming back and saying, right, well, they're gone now, what are you going to do about it?
Not as it stands at the moment. As you say, they're not covered by a tree protection order, and neither are they in a conservation area. So they could be managed by the landowner in the way that you suggest.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin. Sorry, you're still on mute.
I was going to say the same thing. The site could be completely cleared and put down to growing vegetables, greenhouses or whatever without any consideration at all. And so I think what is being proposed and conditioned, I think, is quite right. I don't see any reason why we need to discuss it any further, quite frankly.
Okay. Thank you. So I can't see any further questions. If we're able then to move on to our public speakers. Sorry, Councillor Mellor, you just want to...
Yeah, so I don't know if when we went to the adjournment that automatically lowered our hands. Mine was up before the adjournment and isn't now. So.
I think it did, yes. So.
I had a question about amenity, because obviously originally this was all one garden, and there'd now be 3 houses built in what was originally the garden to serve one house. And fair enough, it was a very large garden, but I was just wondering how much kind of usable recreational open space is left if this development was to go ahead. I think it's not completely clear because some of the land isn't actually owned by the applicant, so I wasn't sure how much was left over.
Yeah, that's the case. It's one of those at the end of the garden, which members will have picked out from the papers, this issue about access to the beck for drainage outfalls. There seems to be an area which the applicant can't display title for. But in terms of the overall area available to the house for outdoor amenity space, I think it's reasonable for a house that size. It's not significantly smaller than the house to the south there. It's similar in plot size to existing 98, well no, to the proposed 98B, which has a to my view, an adequate amount of amenity space. And it's, if you look at that ordnance survey plan on page 25, it's bigger gardens than some, similar size to others. So I don't think there's an overall issue in that respect from our point of view.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I can see no further questions, so we're able to move on then to our public speakers. And our first speaker is Ian Alford. If you're with us, Mr. Alford, if you could just let me know. You may need to press *6, I think. Can you hear me, Mr. Alford? So we don't seem to be having much joy there. So I think, could we try Mr. Lee Vincent, who's the agent for the applicant, and if I could ask technical staff to try and help Mr. Alford in the meantime. Can you hear me, Mr. Vincent?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I'm here. It's Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, so how this works is you get 3 minutes to address the committee. If you could stay on the line after you've spoken, I'll just check whether or not the committee have any questions they'd like to ask you. But
Understood.
you're free to start in your own time.
Thanks, Chair. My name's Lee Vincent of Vincent & Brown, and we are the applicant's agent for the application. The recommendation that sits before you is the culmination of 2 years working with the applicant and officers. And during that time, the scheme has evolved to take on board the issues raised by the local authority and also adjacent properties. We've worked closely with the local authority to provide a scheme that fits within its setting whilst respecting its location. I'm primarily here this afternoon to answer any questions members may have. However, I will address some of the points raised during the application process. In relation to scale and mass, the proposed dwelling has a similar footprint, eaves and ridge height to the adjacent bungalow. In regards to drainage, following consultation with Yorkshire Water, an acceptable drainage design has been agreed, and this will be confirmed by condition. And we can also confirm that all spoil excavated will be removed from the site and disposed of in an acceptable manner, ensuring that existing site levels are maintained. And we've heard in the update that these levels will also be controlled via a condition. The applicant has confirmed their commitment to meet and exceed the requirements of the local authority's climate change policies with highly efficient building fabric and decentralised energy provision. The design uses traditional materials with a building form that respects its context whilst using contemporary detailing that results in a family-sized dwelling, space planned for modern living. In summary, we believe that we've addressed all the issues raised during the application process, resulting in the positive recommendation, and we ask committee to move to approve. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I will be happy to answer any questions any members may have.
Thank you. So I'll just ask if the committee do have any questions at this point. If you could just pop your virtual hand up. I can't see any. So I'll just thank you, Mr. Vincent, for your time this evening. As you'll know, you'll be able to continue watching on YouTube. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, it's Richard Jackson here from Technical Support. I did try taking Mr. Alford out into a breakout room, seeing if you could unmute, and there was no response from him. We could try dialing him in again and trying again, or yeah, we could move on. It could just take a minute or two to try and dial him in, sort of remove him from the meeting and dial him in again.
Do we have a copy of what he was going to say?
Fiona, I'm not sure whether you can answer that. Democracy Officer Fiona.
Yeah, I think you've got to allow time to try and get him back in again as he's an objector to the application.
So I'll try removing him now and just see how we're getting on. Anyway.
And in the meantime, Fiona, do you have a copy?
No, I don't have a copy of exactly what he was going to say. He's not sent in written submissions.
Thank you. Just bear with us then for a couple of minutes whilst we try and get.
I'm just going to go and switch my light on. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's accepted the call, so should be popping into the waiting room shortly, Chair. And I'll bring him straight in if you could just ask him to unmute.
Mr. Alford, can you hear me now? If you're able to unmute.
Hello?
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 Hello, yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. We can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic. What I'll say is you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. If you could just stay on the line after you've spoken, just in case there's any questions.
Okay. I was pushing *6 repeatedly when you asked me to, but nothing was happening.
If you'd like to make a start.
Hello? Can I start my presentation now?
Yeah, start in your own time.
Well, I live in 100B Tadcaster Road, which is next door to the proposal. I've raised objections on the grounds of scale and mass, and also the impact of the semi-basement on surface water. The delegated report for the Outline Planning Commission stated that, as is common with backland development, most of the neighbouring dwellings are single storey in height and remain subservient to the host dwelling. I note that 98B is a two-storey house which sits to the front, and 100C, which sits to the south, is a single-storey building, as is my own bungalow. It's also worth noting that 100C was the last house to be built in the vicinity, and that is a bungalow. The report goes on to say, the outline planning report, that to protect the existing character of the area and to ensure the proposed dwelling does not dominate the neighbouring dwelling, only a single-storey dwelling would be acceptable at this location. The proposal is slightly bigger than what mine is, but it's a bigger house, and I believe it's not subservient to 98B. And if you look on the plans, you can see that becomes quite apparent, because 98B does also include a garage area, which is separate for the proposal. So, as I say, I don't think the proposal is subservient to the house and to its host, and a substantial house is not really appropriate in this location. The other thing is the site is in a Zone 1 flood risk area, adjacent to a flood risk area, and during heavy rain, the water table is near ground level and large puddles can form. The tests for the soakaway showed that a soakaway was not appropriate here, so there are problems with surface water draining. The report into this detailed planning application makes no mention of the potential impact on groundwater. It goes into removing water from the gutters and how it goes into the foul water drain eventually and so on. But there's no, the issue of changes to the groundwater level and potential flooding has not been addressed at all. On a more general note, I was just wondering, is it really green and sustainable to be lowering a house into a 7 metre by 24 metre hole, 1.5 metres deep? I wonder if this creates an unwelcome precedent for other developments in York. And just picking up on what's been said earlier, I notice there's a condition to be applied now that the land level is unchanged. is that, just to confirm, does that mean that if this is approved, the excavated soil is going to be removed from site? And then finally, just looking at the tree survey that was done, there's a total of 20 trees identified on that site. One is in a very poor state, 4 are in good condition, 2 are in medium, and 13 are, well, it says low quality. But some of the trees are actually just covered in ivy, and I think they're probably been working.
If you could wind up now.
Hello?
Please.
Hello?
If you could just wind up, please, Mr. Alford.
Yep. So just to go and summarise, I think the proposal does not meet at least the spirit of a single-storey dwelling on that site. It's a 2-storey house, and it's much significant greater volume than mine. And I also have concerns about the effect of digging, well, what is a semi-basement next door to my plot, and what effect it may have on rainwater, drainage and flooding and so on. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just bear with us a minute, I'll just ask the committee if there's any questions they'd like to raise at this point. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mr. Alford. It was just a quick question, and just before I ask it, my understanding is from the condition that yes, the excavated soil will be removed from site. So I think that answers your question on that. It was just around, I didn't scribble down the details quickly enough. You were mentioning that the heights of the different properties around, and you had 98B as a 2-storey dwelling,
Yes.
and 100C as a bungalow. I didn't catch what 100A was, and your own property is a bungalow as well.
100A is a bungalow.
Is a bungalow, and are any of those bungalows, are they all single story, or do they have dormer windows at all?
A and B are single story. C is a small dormer bungalow.
Right. Thank you.
And that's the last. I was going to say that's the one that was last built, and that's next to 98B.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's fine. That answers my question. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you for speaking, Mr. Alford. You mentioned like puddling in the back garden in terms of flooding, and there being it being adjacent to a flooding area. Are you aware of, in the history of you living at 100B, are you aware of anything more severe than puddling?
No, we just have large puddles.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions, Mr. Alford. So similarly, I'll just thank you for your time this evening, and you'll be able to continue watching the committee on YouTube on the council's page there. So thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. So I could ask then if committee members have got any further questions they'd like to put to officers at this point. Councillor de Gorn.
Just on this question of groundwater, I'm aware we have policies about flood zone, which is presumably fluvial flooding. Do we have any policies about areas that are subject to groundwater flooding or surface flooding? Or is it only the sort of Environment Agency flood zones that we have in our policies? We're on mute now.
Well spotted. Our general policies, drainage policies, and national drainage policies are to mitigate against the flooding of adjacent land and buildings, and we do that through a variety of methods, including making sure that the drainage proposals for a development site capture all the runoff and reduce it below existing levels of runoff. So the scheme that's to be designed, we don't have it on the presentation, but the scheme is to to capture runoff generated by the development into attenuation tanks, and then for that to be released at an attenuated level into the sewer that crosses the land to the rear of the property at the moment, and that's the calculations which come to which inform the design will take into account the fact that that there is an excavation there and how that excavated land is dealt with. But that should the idea is to capture that additional runoff created by the new hard surfacing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a question about subservience. Mr. Alford was talking about the need for the buildings to sort of step back, I suppose it is, as it comes away from Tadcaster Road. And I appreciate this may have been apparent from the site visit, which I wasn't able to attend yesterday, unfortunately. Is it correct that, as Mr. Alford was suggesting, that that this building should be subservient to 98B, and in your view, is it, if it is the case? And I suppose ultimately what I'm asking is that a policy that we have that needs to be applied, or is that more of a common understanding that buildings should be subservient if they're built on the backland?
I don't think our policies are that specific in terms of backland developments, but it is a general principle that we've tended to apply when they've come forward in this sort of piecemeal way in rear gardens, that we try and get them to be subservient to the principal house. I mean, obviously, in this case, it's a bit more tricky because the principal house is would actually be 1, 2, 3 houses away on the Tadcaster Road frontage, and all those properties in the back are backland development, and this is a backland development to a backland development. But so we have generally followed that principle through, and I think that's illustrated in the way that the sites, all these back garden sites, has developed out. I don't think the new development will be visible from public land, as far as I can tell. There might be some glimpses through houses on I think it's Slingsby Avenue to the north, to the rear, but it's not going to be a prominent development. And I would say, and I think the assessment has been that whilst it's a 2-storey house, in most views it will appear to be single-storey and it will not break through the ridgeline. I mean, it's a very, very marginal increase, perhaps, over the, if at all, over the property at 100B. But it will appear as a single-storey house. It would only be when you're in quite close proximity to it where you will pick out that there is an upper level and a lower level and an excavation. And I would, as a planner recommending a course of action to you, I think I'd probably say that it would be very difficult to, in that general perception of the area, to say that it might be overbearing or lacks a subservience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. My point relates to something that the objector said, Mr. Alcock, is it, I think, which concerns the excavation, its effect on the water table. Now, whilst you can deal with surface water through guttering and leading into a sewer, subsurface water is a problem. Now, the fact that the percolation test has failed suggests one of 2 things. Either there's a very high water table, or the soil contains a considerable amount of clay, which doesn't allow water to percolate through. And my suspicion, because it's close to Holgate Beck, is that there's a high water table here. Does the possibility exist that digging into the subsurface ground to create the basement, is that going to displace subsurface water and raise the water table for adjacent properties?
Can I bring in my colleague Richard Wells, who's the council's senior flood risk engineer, who is probably hopefully better placed than me to answer those technical questions.
Hi. Good evening. Thank you, Chair. My name is Richard Wells. I'm the council's, one of the council's senior flood risk engineers. I work in the flood risk management team, deal with all new and redevelopment from a flood risk and drainage point of view. Councillor Fisher, I think your second point is more of the case. When I was on site witnessing the soakaway test, the ground was pure clay to quite a depth, so there was no evidence of a high water table, and I think that the ponding that one of the speakers has just mentioned, it'd be more a case of rainwater standing in his garden on top of that clay layer. So when digging, excavating the basement for this building, should it get planning permission, that will have no effect on the water table because it's literally pure clay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
I can't see any further questions at this point, so if we are happy to move into debate, I'll invite anybody to advance an opinion or proposal. I've got Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I think from what I've heard from the questions and answers from officers, it seems fairly straightforward in a way, in that there's obviously a question mark over what a single-storey dwelling means, but given that that's not prescribed by any statute, as far as I can understand, then I think it's hard to apply single-storey dwelling with any real sense of anything on this application. And I think it was also made clear that the substantive application supersedes any outline application that was previously made. It's not a reserved matters application beneath that. And I think I would feel less comfortable if this was, if the ridge height of this dwelling was higher than the neighbouring property, but I think, you know, give or take a few centimetres, it doesn't appear to be. So as such, I really don't see that there's any grounds for refusal. And I think, if anything, it's probably a reasonably innovative use of space in a reasonably constricted site. So I think on that basis, I'm happy to move that we approve in line with the officer's recommendation and with the additional conditions as were circulated this morning.
Thank you. Is anybody willing to take back? See, Councillor Whether you've got your hand up for the first bite at that, if you want to.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Crawshaw beat me to it, but I'm happy to second, and I would agree that actually digging a basement in this way, after what I've heard about the water table not being the issue and it just being pure clay, I'm happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go then to Councillor Fisher. You've got your.
Sorry, thank you. I can't see anywhere in the conditions that it actually stipulates that all spoil from the excavation should be removed from the site. Now, the applicant has indicated that he's prepared to do this. The applicant's agent has said that will be done. Would it be prudent for us to actually condition that that be done so we don't get a build-up of raising ground levels on site?
Chair, that was the new condition 20.
Sorry.
Right at the end states that any soil excavated shall be removed from the application site.
Thank you. I haven't been able to see those. Thank you.
You, Councillor de Gorn?
Well, I certainly somewhat reassured by the sort of information about the flood risk. I think had it been groundwater, I would have concerns, because obviously losing that capacity of groundwater plus the area of the tank, it could well have a significant impact. But I think that the issue that I'm most concerned about is the loss of trees on the site, but I do accept the difficult position that, as has been pointed out, you know, as with any site, if it's not preservation order or conservation area, we've got limited capacity to stop a developer from just clearing the site before they come forward with their application. So on that basis, I think we've had reassurances about the height of it. I would like to see the requirement about replacement planting, and obviously if the developer feels generous to contribute towards some planting elsewhere in the city, I'm sure that'd be very welcome.
Thank you. I can't then at this point see any further questions, so we are happy to move to the vote. If I could just firstly check across, if Gareth, if you could give us sort of brief rundown of what the vote is, and then I'll just double check everybody's heard the whole debate, and I'll go specifically to Councillor Perrott as well.
Thank you, Chair. So the motion is that permission is granted, subject to the conditions in the agenda report, the amended condition 2 and the new condition 20 that were tabled earlier today.
Thank you. If I could just have a show of hands from the committee on screen, you've all heard the whole debate. Thank you. I think that's everyone. And Councillor Perrott, could I just?
Yes, I can confirm that I have heard everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So Fiona, if you could conduct the vote, please.
Certainly, Chair. If members, when I read your name out, you could indicate whether you are voting for the proposal or against it. Councillor Crawshaw.
For.
Councillor Colwick.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Galvin. Councillor Galvin? You're muted.
I think my wife would like to mute me. For.
Councillor Dagorn.
For.
Councillor Melly.
For.
Councillor Orrell.
For.
Councillor Perrott.
For.
Councillor Wardby.
For.
Councillor Webb.
For.
And Councillor Hollier.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you. So that is approved. We have no further business on the agenda this evening, so I'll just briefly thank everybody for your time this evening and look forward to seeing you next time.
The webcast.